Hello, I'm doing a quick 8-question survey about Genshin. Wanna participate? I asked this question to random AR55 to 60 accounts that I found through the co-op feature. Around 95% of people actually agreed, and to those people I asked them this. Who's your main? How many stars do you usually get in the Spiral Abyss? Do you know what EM does? Do you know what crit value is? Do you know what snapshotting is? Do you know what ICD is? Do you know what elemental gauge theory is? Personal bias aside, who do you think is the best character in the game meta-wise? After getting 150 responses, here's what I found. First of all, let me explain questions 3 to 7. EM, or Elemental Mastery, is a stat that increases your reaction damage. For Crystallize, this stat increases shield strength. You can see exactly how much damage increase you're getting by going into your character details. Crit value is a way of measuring how good artifacts are. The formula for crit value is crit rate multiplied by 2 plus crit damage. While crit value isn't the best way of measuring how good artifacts are, it's fast and easy. A high crit value artifact piece is good, but a low crit value artifact piece can still be really good. Snapshotting is when a talent keeps its initial stats when cast for its entire duration. For example, casting Oz while inside of Bennett's buff gives him this buff for his entire duration, even when Bennett's buff expires. Not all talents do this. For example, Yaimiko's totems don't have this effect. ICD, or internal cooldown, is how fast you can apply elements. It's very easy to see this when trying to break shields with Catalyst characters. There are general rules to ICD, but there are some exceptions. For example, Guoba has no ICD, meaning that he can apply Pyro as fast as he wants to. Elemental gauge theory, or elemental durability, are the rules surrounding what element an enemy is affected by. For example, if I use Child's Charge Shot and then use Bennett's Burst vaporizes the Hydro and removes the Hydro aura. However, if I use Child's Skill and then use Bennett's Burst still vaporizes the Hydro but does not remove the Hydro aura. This is because Child's Charge Shot applies less Hydro compared to his skill. There's some more stuff going on with elemental gauge theory, but I won't get into that today. First of all, let's address the first question. Who's your main? While most people just said one character, a few said 2 or 3, and some said they didn't have a main. This data was collected a few days after Clorin's release, so who do you think had the most mains? If you said Clorin, congratulations, that's wrong. Out of 83 current obtainable characters, 45 of them had at least one representative. 27 of these characters had more than one representative, Clorind being one of them with only 2 mains. 10 people said that they didn't have a main, and only 4 characters reached double-digit mains. Tied at third are Xiao and Nouvelette with 11 mains each. Second place goes to Hu Tao with 12 mains. And with a decent lead in first is Arlecchino with 16 mains. Next, let's move on to the second question. How many stars do people usually get in the Spiral Abyss? In a previous video, I found that around half of all players reached 12-3, but that was 2 days before Abyss reset, and the sample size was AR58 to 60. This time, Abyss still had a week left, and the sample size was AR55 to 60. So out of 36 stars, what do you think was the average? The average amount of stars was 22 stars, with exactly the same amount of people not doing Abyss as full clearing the Abyss, both with 18% of people. But now, let's get to the part that I was actually curious about. How much of a knowledge check is the Spiral Abyss? Out of 150 people, how many of them do you think actually knew what Elemental Mastery does? Around 89% of players knew what Elemental Mastery did, with everyone who full cleared the Spiral Abyss answering yes. What about crit value? Unlike Elemental Mastery, this is a term that was made up by the community as it doesn't even have its own page on the wiki. What percentage of players do you think know what crit value is, and what about those who full cleared the Abyss? Around 81% of players actually knew what crit value was, with 93% of Abyss full clears knowing as well. What about snapshotting? Again, snapshotting is essentially your talents keeping the same stats as when they are cast. How many players do you think knew what snapshotting was, and what about those who full cleared Abyss? Compared to crit value and Elemental Mastery, this percentage falls off a cliff with only 37% of players knowing what snapshotting is. However, the majority of those who full cleared Abyss knew what snapshotting was, with 63% of those people responding with yes. What about ICD? Again, ICD is the rule surrounding how fast you can apply elements. How many players do you think knew what ICD was, and what about those who full cleared Abyss? Just like snapshotting, most people answered no, with only 42% of players knowing what ICD was. And just like snapshotting, the majority of players who full cleared Abyss knew what ICD was, with 70% of them answering yes. The last yes or no question was about elemental gauge theory, something that only the sweatiest of tryhards learn about. Because I have to double swirl Hydro because Child's definitely doing the most damage in this team, right? How many players do you think knew what elemental gauge theory was, and what about those who full cleared Abyss? An incredibly low 16% of people knew what elemental gauge theory was, with 37% of people who full cleared Abyss knowing what it was as well. This shouldn't really come as a surprise, but people who can full clear Abyss generally know more combat related things compared to your average player. So if you're looking to try to get more stars in the Abyss, you might already be able to. Sometimes you don't need insane artifacts or meta characters. Just applying tricks like snapshotting or ICD can shave off enough seconds to get more stars. Lastly, we have the best character in the game. Out of the 83 characters in the game, 25 of them received at least one vote. Some people chose more than one character since it was too hard to decide. 15 people also said that there were just too many characters to choose from, which I can see why. When I think about the best character, a few names come to mind. Xingqiu, Bennett, Neuvillette, and Farina, but honestly, I can see the argument for characters like Kazuha, Nahida, Fischl, Xiangling, and a few others. So what about you? Who do you think are the best characters meta-wise? Because according to these 150 people, the top 5 best characters are Kazuha with 9 votes, Bennett with 12 votes, Farina with 29 votes, Arlecchino with 41 votes, and Neuvillette with a staggering 52 votes. But what about the other characters? As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of characters I can see the argument for being the best character. Nahida got 6 votes, Fischl got 1 vote, and Xiangling got a depressing 0 votes. There were some that were extremely surprising for me, like Raiden receiving 8 votes, Eula receiving 4 votes, and Diluc receiving 3 votes? But by far the most surprising thing out of all of this was Xingqiu. Because out of the 150 people that I surveyed, only one person said Xingqiu, and they were the last person I asked as well. Thank you, Azazaza, for saying Xingqiu. Throughout my data collection, I met a lot of nice and interesting people. Fortnite, Wadusi, the proud Ziox viewer, Kolomi, Nanashi, so many people were so nice, and that made my co-op experience way better. I know a lot of people get scared when they see a high AR player, but from my experience, a lot of us would actually love to help, just like me. I love the combat system for Genshin, so if you need advice trying to 36-star Abyss, or really anything in general, Feel free to ask in the comments below, and I'm sure people like myself will try and give the best advice that we can. We all play the same game, and there's only so much content to go around. We're just bored, please ask.